The ancient stones of Old Hroldan Inn have witnessed centuries of history unfold within their weathered walls, each timber beam and cobblestone foundation holding memories that stretch back through the ages like whispers carried on the mountain wind. Tonight, we delve into the spectral mysteries that haunt this legendary establishment, where the boundaries between the living and the dead have grown thin through countless years of tragedy, triumph, and the restless souls who refuse to find peace. Nestled within the rugged landscape of the Reach, where jagged peaks pierce the sky and ancient Nordic traditions run as deep as the mountain roots themselves, Old Hroldan Inn stands as more than mere shelter for weary travelers. This weathered structure serves as a bridge between worlds, a place where the veil separating the realm of the living from the domain of the departed has been worn gossamer thin by centuries of accumulated sorrow, unfulfilled oaths, and violent deaths that echo through time itself. The story we explore tonight transcends simple ghost tales or campfire stories designed to frighten children during long winter nights. Instead, we uncover a complex tapestry of supernatural phenomena that reveals fundamental truths about the nature of death, memory, and the forces that bind souls to the mortal realm long after their physical forms have crumbled to dust. Through careful examination of historical records, first-hand accounts from countless visitors, and the persistent legends that have grown around this haunted establishment, we piece together a narrative that spans multiple eras and touches upon some of the most significant events in Nordic history. The geographical positioning of Old Hroldan Inn proves crucial to understanding why this particular location has become such a focal point for supernatural activity. Situated along ancient trade routes that have connected the holds of Skyrim for thousands of years, the inn has served as a way station for merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, and adventurers, representing every walk of life imaginable. Each traveller who passed through these doors brought their own stories, their own burdens, and occasionally their own tragic ends, contributing to the accumulated spiritual energy that permeates every corner of the building. Archaeological evidence suggests that the current inn stands upon foundations that date back to the late First Era, during the height of Nordic expansion when ambitious jarls carved kingdoms from the wilderness through force of arms and strength of will. The original structure likely served as a fortified way station, protecting travelers from the numerous dangers that lurked in the untamed wilderness of the Reach. Wild animals, hostile weather, and roving bands of forsworn ancestors all posed constant threats to those brave or foolish enough to venture through these treacherous mountain passes. The inn's strategic location made it an inevitable witness to some of the most violent and consequential events in regional history. During the various conflicts that swept through Skyrim over the centuries, Old Hroldan served alternately as a neutral meeting ground, a military staging area, and occasionally a battlefield itself, when disputes could not be resolved through words alone. The accumulated violence and emotional trauma from these events created what scholars of the supernatural describe as psychic imprints, residual energies that remain embedded within the physical structure, like bloodstains that refuse to wash clean. Among the most persistent and well-documented supernatural phenomena at Old Hroldan Inn are the apparitions that appear with startling regularity to guests staying in specific rooms. These manifestations differ significantly from typical ghost sightings in their consistency, clarity, and apparent intelligence. Rather than vague shadows or fleeting glimpses of translucent figures, visitors frequently report detailed interactions with spirits who seem fully aware of their surroundings and capable of coherent communication with the living. The most famous of these spectral residents is the ghost of Tiber Septim himself, though historical analysis suggests this identification may be more legend than fact. According to numerous accounts dating back several centuries, guests staying in the inn's most expensive room occasionally encounter a figure claiming to be the legendary emperor during his youth, before his rise to power and conquest of Tamriel. This apparition appears as a young Nord warrior, bearing the confident demeanor and martial bearing that would later characterize one of history's most successful military commanders. The conversations reported between living guests and this spectral figure reveal fascinating insights into the nature of ghostly manifestations and their relationship to historical memory. Rather than simply replaying past events like some supernatural recording, this spirit demonstrates awareness of current circumstances and shows genuine interest in the affairs of modern Skyrim. He inquires about political developments, military conflicts, and social changes that have occurred centuries after his supposed death, suggesting either remarkable supernatural awareness or perhaps something more complex than a simple haunting. Skeptical investigators have proposed several alternative explanations for these encounters, ranging from elaborate hoaxes perpetrated by the inn's staff to collective hallucinations brought on by the establishment's reputation for supernatural activity. However, the consistency of details across hundreds of independent accounts reported by visitors with no apparent connection to one another challenges these mundane explanations. The ghost consistently appears wearing specific clothing, bears particular physical characteristics, and demonstrates knowledge of historical events that many witnesses could not have possessed independently. More intriguing still are the accounts of visitors who claim to have learned previously unknown historical information from their conversations with this apparition, details that were later verified through archival research or archaeological discoveries. These cases suggest that if the encounters are indeed genuine supernatural phenomena, the spirit possesses access to information that extends beyond what any individual mortal consciousness could reasonably contain. The spectral figure's behavior patterns reveal additional complexities that distinguish these manifestations from typical ghost stories. Rather than appearing randomly or in response to specific triggers, the apparition seems to choose its manifestations deliberately, showing preference for certain types of visitors while remaining completely invisible to others. Veterans of military service report encounters far more frequently than civilian guests, suggesting some connection between the spirit's interests and martial experience, or perhaps shared understanding of the warrior's path. During these encounters, the ghost displays particular interest in discussing matters of leadership, military strategy, and the responsibilities that come with power over others. These conversations often take on an almost mentoring quality, with the spirit offering advice or perspective on challenges facing the living visitor. Such behavior aligns remarkably well with historical accounts of Tiber Septim's personality, particularly his reputation for recognizing potential in others and his lifelong interest in developing capable subordinates. The physical manifestations associated with these encounters extend beyond mere visual apparitions to include tangible effects that leave lasting evidence of supernatural activity. Guests frequently report finding their personal belongings rearranged in meaningful patterns, weapons cleaned and sharpened by unseen hands, and occasionally small gifts of historical artifacts that appear without explanation. These objects, when examined by experts, consistently prove to be authentic pieces from the appropriate historical period, their presence inexplicable through conventional means. Temperature fluctuations represent another consistent element of these supernatural encounters, with witnesses reporting sudden drops in ambient temperature that occur specifically in conjunction with the apparition's manifestation. Unlike the general coldness associated with many ghostly phenomena, these temperature changes seem purposeful and controlled, creating zones of coolness that move with the spirit and dissipate immediately upon its departure. The inn's staff, many of whom represent families that have worked at the establishment for generations, maintain a complex relationship with their supernatural residents that reflects centuries of accumulated experience dealing with paranormal phenomena. Rather than fear or attempts at exorcism, the current management approach combines respectful acknowledgement with practical accommodation, treating the ghosts as permanent residents whose needs and preferences must be considered alongside those of living guests. This pragmatic approach has evolved through trial and error over many decades, shaped by the understanding that attempts to banish or ignore the supernatural elements typically result in increased activity and more disruptive manifestations. By accepting the presence of their ghostly inhabitants and establishing informal protocols for coexistence, the inn's staff has achieved a remarkable level of stability that allows both living and dead to share the same space with minimal conflict. The seasonal patterns in supernatural activity at Old Hroldan Inn provide additional insight into the nature of these phenomena and their connection to broader cosmic cycles. Activity levels fluctuate predictably throughout the year, reaching peak intensity during specific periods that correspond to historically significant dates or astronomical events. The anniversary dates of major battles, the death dates of prominent historical figures, and certain lunar phases all correlate with increased ghostly manifestations and more frequent supernatural encounters. These cyclical patterns suggest that the supernatural phenomena at Old Hroldan Inn operate according to principles that extend beyond simple residual haunting or emotional imprinting. The precision and predictability of these fluctuations indicate some form of underlying structure or organization that governs spectral activity, implying conscious intention rather than random supernatural energy discharge. During the depths of winter, when howling winds carry the bitter cold through every crack and crevice of the ancient structure, the supernatural activity reaches its most intense manifestations. Guests report not only visual encounters, but also auditory phenomena that seem to emerge from the very walls themselves. The sounds of phantom footsteps echo through corridors where no living person walks, accompanied by the distant murmur of conversations in archaic dialects that few modern scholars could readily identify. These ghostly voices speak of concerns and conflicts that belong to eras long past, their words carrying the weight of unfinished business and unresolved disputes. The spectral inhabitants of Old Hroldan Inn appear to maintain their own social hierarchy and territorial divisions that mirror the complex relationships they may have possessed in life. Certain areas of the establishment seem to belong exclusively to specific spirits, with other ghosts showing marked deference when passing through these claimed spaces. The main common room, for instance, remains largely under the influence of what staff members have come to call the Commander, the apparition most commonly identified as the young Tiber Septim, while the upper guest chambers host a rotating cast of lesser spirits who appear and vanish according to patterns that remain largely mysterious to mortal observers. These territorial arrangements occasionally result in supernatural conflicts that manifest as poltergeist activity, with objects moving violently through the air, doors slamming without apparent cause, and sudden temperature fluctuations that sweep through entire sections of the building. Such disturbances typically resolve themselves within a matter of hours, suggesting that even in death, these former warriors and nobles eventually find ways to settle their differences through negotiation or force of personality rather than endless conflict. The inn's library, a relatively recent addition constructed during the Third Era, houses an extensive collection of historical documents that seem to attract particular attention from the ghostly residents. Visitors studying in this quiet sanctuary frequently report the sensation of being watched by invisible presences, along with the mysterious appearance of additional books and scrolls that supplement whatever research they happen to be conducting. These supplementary materials always prove relevant to the reader's interests, appearing with uncanny timing and containing information that advances their understanding in precisely the directions they need most. Scholars who have spent extended periods researching at Old Hroldan Inn describe a collaborative relationship with these helpful spirits who seem to possess encyclopedic knowledge of Nordic history and demonstrate genuine enthusiasm for sharing their accumulated wisdom with serious students. The ghosts appear capable of locating obscure references, suggesting connections between seemingly unrelated historical events, and even correcting factual errors in published works through subtle manipulations of the available materials. The most remarkable aspect of these scholarly collaborations involves instances where living researchers have discovered entirely new historical information through their supernatural partnerships. Ancient battle strategies, forgotten diplomatic negotiations, and personal details about legendary figures have all emerged through these ghostly consultations, with the information subsequently verified through independent archaeological discoveries or the uncovering of corroborating documents in distant archives. These educational encounters suggest that the spirits inhabiting Old Hroldan Inn retain not only their individual memories, but also some form of collective consciousness that allows them access to knowledge that transcends their personal experiences. The mechanism behind this expanded awareness remains one of the greatest mysteries surrounding the supernatural phenomena at the inn, challenging conventional understanding of how consciousness persists after death and what capabilities departed souls might retain or develop in their spectral existence. The dining hall presents another fascinating arena for supernatural activity, where ghostly banquets occasionally manifest during the deep hours of night. Staff members arriving for early morning preparations sometimes discover evidence of elaborate feasts that occurred while the building stood empty, with tables set for dozens of guests using dishes and utensils that match no inventory maintained by the living proprietors. The phantom meals leave behind tangible traces including crumbs, wine stains, and the lingering aromas of foods prepared according to ancient recipes that have been lost to modern culinary knowledge. These spectral celebrations appear to commemorate significant anniversaries or victories from Nordic history, with the ghostly participants reenacting important social gatherings that may have taken place centuries or even millennia in the past. The level of detail in these recreations extends to period-appropriate clothing, furniture arrangements, and social customs that reflect extensive knowledge of historical practices and cultural traditions. Living guests who happen upon these phantom festivities report being welcomed as honored visitors, invited to participate in toasts and conversations that bridge the gap between past and present. The ghostly hosts demonstrate perfect manners according to ancient Nordic traditions, treating their mortal guests with courtesy and respect while sharing stories and perspectives that illuminate aspects of history rarely captured in formal written records. The emotional resonance of these encounters often proves profound for the living participants, who describe feeling connected to a larger historical narrative that extends far beyond their individual lifespans. The experience of sharing a meal with legendary figures from the past, even in spectral form, creates lasting memories that fundamentally alter how these guests understand their own place within the continuing story of Nordic civilization. The inn's kitchen, naturally enough, serves as the epicenter for these culinary manifestations. The ghostly cooks who occasionally appear in this space demonstrate mastery of traditional Nordic cooking techniques that have been preserved through supernatural means long after they disappeared from common practice. These spectral chefs work with ingredients that materialize from unknown sources, preparing dishes that perfectly recreate the flavors and presentations of bygone eras. The Phantom Kitchen's staff maintain their own schedules and preferences, generally working during the quiet hours when living cooks have retired for the evening. They show remarkable consideration for their mortal counterparts, carefully cleaning their work areas and occasionally leaving behind prepared ingredients or partially completed dishes that greatly assist with the following day's meal service. This collaborative approach has fostered a relationship of mutual respect between the living and dead kitchen workers that represents one of the most harmonious aspects of the inn's supernatural ecosystem. Guests who venture into the kitchen during these spectral cooking sessions report being offered tastes of dishes that exist nowhere else in the modern world. These phantom foods possess flavors and textures that seem impossibly rich and complex, prepared with techniques and ingredients that combine familiar Nordic traditions with refinements that suggest centuries of culinary evolution occurring in the realm of the dead. The inn's basement levels, carved directly into the mountain bedrock, harbor some of the oldest and most intense supernatural phenomena in the entire establishment. These subterranean chambers served multiple purposes throughout the inn's long history, functioning alternately as storage areas, wine cellars, and during times of conflict, as temporary prisons or interrogation facilities. The accumulated emotional trauma from these varied uses has created an atmosphere so dense with psychic energy that even individuals with no particular sensitivity to supernatural phenomena report feeling overwhelmed by unnamed emotions and inexplicable sensations of dread or sorrow. The basement spirits differ markedly from their more sociable counterparts in the upper levels, displaying behaviors that suggest deeper psychological wounds and more complex relationships with their mortal existence. These entities rarely communicate directly with living visitors, instead expressing themselves through environmental manipulations that create elaborate symbolic displays using available objects and materials. The messages conveyed through these supernatural arrangements often relate to injustices suffered during life, undelivered warnings about historical events, or attempts to reveal the locations of hidden treasures or important documents. Deciphering these cryptic communications requires considerable knowledge of Nordic history and symbolism, making them accessible primarily to scholars and researchers who possess the necessary background to interpret their meaning. The most disturbing basement phenomena involve temporal distortions that seem to trap visitors within reenactments of traumatic events from the past. Guests who venture too deeply into these lower levels sometimes report experiencing vivid flashbacks to violent confrontations, torture sessions, or executions that occurred within these chambers centuries ago. These episodes feel completely real to the individuals experiencing them, lasting subjective hours or even days while occupying only minutes of actual time in the present world. Recovery from these temporal displacement episodes typically requires several days of rest and careful monitoring, as the affected individuals struggle to separate their artificially implanted memories from their actual personal experiences. The inn staff has developed protocols for managing these situations, including warning systems to prevent guests from accessing the most dangerous basement areas without proper preparation and supervision. Despite their frightening nature, these basement encounters have provided invaluable insights into historical events that were never properly documented through conventional means. The spectral reenactments appear to preserve accurate details about political conspiracies, military strategies, and personal conflicts that shape Nordic history in ways that formal records never captured. Researchers brave enough to endure these disturbing experiences have emerged with information that has revolutionized scholarly understanding of several important historical periods. The upper floors of Old Hroldan Inn host a different category of supernatural residents whose presence manifests through more subtle but equally significant phenomena. These elevated chambers seem to attract the spirits of individuals who occupied positions of significant responsibility during their mortal lives, including military commanders, political leaders, and influential merchants whose decisions affected the lives of countless others. The spectral nobility inhabiting these upper chambers maintains the dignified bearing and refined mannerisms that characterize their earthly stations, appearing in full regalia that reflects their former positions of authority. Unlike the more casual interactions reported in the common areas below, encounters with these elevated spirits follow strict protocols of courtly etiquette that seem to bridge centuries of cultural evolution, requiring visitors to observe formal behaviors that have long since fallen out of common practice among the living. These aristocratic ghosts demonstrate particular interest in matters of governance and statecraft, engaging living visitors in detailed discussions about the challenges of leadership and the weight of decisions that affect entire populations. Their conversations reveal perspectives shaped by centuries of observing the consequences of mortal political choices, offering insights that combine personal experience with the expanded awareness that seems to accompany their supernatural existence. The phantom courtiers show remarkable knowledge of bloodlines and genealogies that extend far beyond what any individual could reasonably remember from their mortal lifetime. They can trace family connections across multiple generations, identifying relationships and inheritances that have been forgotten by the living descendants themselves. This genealogical expertise has proven invaluable to visiting nobles seeking to establish legitimate claims to titles or properties, though the ghosts demonstrate careful discretion in sharing such sensitive information. The furnishings in these upper chambers undergo periodic transformations that reflect different historical periods, with room arrangements shifting to match the preferences and customs of whatever era the resident spirits happen to be channeling at any given time. Guests might retire for the evening in a chamber decorated according to Fourth Era sensibilities, only to awaken surrounded by First Era luxury that includes tapestries, furniture, and decorative objects that predate the inn's documented construction by several centuries. These temporal redecorations extend beyond mere visual changes to include functional modifications that seem to alter the fundamental nature of the physical space itself. Rooms expand or contract to accommodate different architectural styles. Walls develop additional windows or doorways that lead to chambers that cannot possibly exist within the building's known structure. And fireplaces appear in locations where no chimneys could logically provide proper ventilation. The practical implications of these spatial modifications challenge conventional understanding of how supernatural phenomena interact with physical reality. The ghostly alterations appear completely solid and functional to living occupants, supporting weight and providing actual illumination or warmth as needed. However, these changes typically vanish with the dawn, returning the chambers to their normal configurations and leaving behind only faint traces that suggest the extraordinary transformations that occurred during the night hours. The inn's guest registry, maintained continuously since the early Second Era, contains entries written in scripts and languages that span the entire breadth of Tamrielic linguistic evolution. Living guests occasionally discover their own names already inscribed in the ledger using handwriting that perfectly matches their own, despite never having visited the establishment before. These preemptive registrations often include accurate predictions about the duration of their stay and specific room assignments that align perfectly with their actual preferences and needs. More mysteriously, the registry sometimes contains entries for individuals who have not yet arrived but appear at the inn's door within days or weeks of their spectral registration. These phantom reservations demonstrate an apparent ability to perceive future events and suggest that the supernatural residents possess some form of prophetic awareness that extends their influence beyond the immediate present into the realm of approaching possibilities. The accuracy of these predictive entries has made the guest registry an informal oracle that local residents consult when seeking guidance about upcoming events or important decisions. The ghostly scribes who maintain these supernatural records demonstrate remarkable precision in their forecasting, though their predictions often arrive in cryptic forms that require careful interpretation to extract their practical meaning. During the autumn months, when the mountain air carries the first hints of approaching winter, and the shortened days create longer periods of darkness, the supernatural activity throughout Old Hroldan Inn reaches a different kind of intensity than the dramatic manifestations of the winter season. These autumn phenomena focus more heavily on memory and nostalgia, with the ghostly residents seeming to engage in collective reminiscence about their mortal experiences and the world they once knew. The common room fireplace becomes a focal point for these nostalgic gatherings, with phantom flames that burn without consuming fuel and provide warmth that penetrates deeper than mere physical heat. Living guests seated near this supernatural fire often report experiencing vivid memories that do not belong to them, seeing glimpses of landscapes that no longer exist, and participating in conversations with long-dead friends and family members. These borrowed memories appear to come from the collective experiences of all the spirits inhabiting the inn, creating a vast library of personal recollections that spans multiple centuries and encompasses perspectives from every level of Nordic society. Merchants recall trading expeditions through treacherous mountain passes. Soldiers remember the camaraderie of campaign life and the terror of battle. Nobles reflect on the intricate web of alliances and betrayals that defined court politics. And common folk share simple moments of joy and sorrow that illuminate the daily realities of life in earlier eras. The emotional weight of these shared memories often proves overwhelming for living participants, who struggle to process the accumulated experiences of multiple lifetimes within the span of a single evening. However, those who successfully integrate these phantom recollections report gaining profound insights into the continuity of human experience across different historical periods, recognizing common themes and challenges that transcend the specific circumstances of any particular era. The inn's chapel, a modest sanctuary added during the Third Era to serve the spiritual needs of travelers, hosts some of the most complex supernatural phenomena in the entire establishment. The ghostly congregations that gather here represent individuals from vastly different religious backgrounds and historical periods, creating theological discussions that span multiple faiths and conflicting belief systems. These spectral religious gatherings demonstrate remarkable tolerance and intellectual curiosity, with spirits who may have been bitter enemies in life engaging in respectful dialogue about the nature of divinity and the proper ways to honor the gods. The conversations reveal how religious understanding has evolved over time while identifying core spiritual concerns that remain constant across different eras and cultural contexts. The phantom priests who occasionally conduct services in this chapel possess knowledge of ritual practices that combine elements from multiple religious traditions, creating hybrid ceremonies that seem to satisfy the diverse spiritual needs of their supernatural congregation. These blended liturgies include invocations in ancient languages, symbolic gestures that predate written history, and musical elements that produce harmonies beyond the capabilities of mortal voices. Living visitors who participate in these ghostly religious services report experiencing profound spiritual experiences that transcend denominational boundaries, feeling connected to divine forces through practices that seem to bypass the intellectual barriers that often separate different faith traditions. The supernatural clergy demonstrate remarkable skill in adapting their approach to accommodate the beliefs and comfort levels of mortal participants, creating inclusive worship experiences that honor both ancient traditions and contemporary spiritual sensibilities. The inn's stable complex, though primarily ruined in the modern era, continues to host phantom horses and their ghostly riders who arrive and depart according to schedules that seem to follow the rhythms of centuries-old travel patterns. These spectral mounts appear as magnificent examples of Nordic horse breeding, displaying the strength and endurance that enabled ancient warriors to conduct lightning raids across vast distances. The ghostly riders represent a cross-section of historical travelers who used Old Hroldan Inn as a way station during their earthly journeys, including royal messengers carrying urgent dispatches, merchant caravans transporting valuable goods, and military scouts gathering intelligence about enemy movements. Their continued arrivals and departures suggest that some aspects of their mortal missions remain incomplete, driving them to repeat their journeys in an endless cycle of supernatural duty. These phantom cavalry units sometimes invite living visitors to join their spectral expeditions, offering rides through landscapes that exist only in memory and leading tours of battlefields where the grass has long since grown over the bones of ancient warriors. The experience of riding with these ghostly horsemen provides unique perspectives on Nordic military history, revealing tactical considerations and geographical knowledge that illuminate the strategic thinking behind famous historical campaigns. The sensation of supernatural horseback riding differs markedly from its mortal equivalent, with the phantom mounts seeming to glide across terrain that would normally present impossible obstacles for conventional horses. Rivers become mere inconveniences to be crossed without regard for depth or current, while steep mountain slopes transform into gentle paths that pose no challenge to the spectral steeds and their passengers. During these otherworldly expeditions, the ghostly guides share stories and observations that bring historical events to vivid life. describing the personalities of legendary figures and the behind-the-scenes details that shaped the outcome of famous conflicts. The accumulated wisdom of these supernatural veterans provides insights into military strategy and leadership that remain relevant for understanding both historical events and contemporary challenges. The gardens surrounding Old Hroldan Inn, though largely overgrown in their current state, continue to bloom with phantom vegetation that appears according to seasonal cycles that follow no earthly calendar. These spectral plants include species that have been extinct for centuries, preserved in supernatural form long after their mortal counterparts succumbed to climate change or human interference. The ghostly gardeners who tend these phantom botanical displays demonstrate horticultural knowledge that spans multiple eras of Nordic agricultural development, maintaining growing techniques that combine traditional methods with innovations that seem to transcend normal limitations of soil and climate. Their supernatural cultivation produces fruits and vegetables with flavors that exceed anything available in the mortal world, offering tastes that seem to capture the essence of perfect growing conditions and ideal genetic development. Living visitors granted access to these phantom harvests report experiencing nutrition that affects both body and spirit, providing sustenance that seems to heal not only physical ailments, but also emotional wounds and spiritual emptiness. The ghostly gardeners select recipients for these supernatural gifts according to criteria that remain mysterious to mortal observers, though their choices consistently demonstrate wisdom and compassion that suggest deep understanding of human nature and genuine concern for the welfare of living souls. The medicinal herbs that grow within these spectral gardens possess properties that far exceed their mortal equivalents, capable of treating conditions that conventional remedies cannot address. However, these phantom medicines work only for individuals whose ailments stem from supernatural causes or who have been specifically chosen by the ghostly physicians who oversee the garden's therapeutic applications. As evening shadows lengthen across the inn's ancient courtyard, and the first stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky above the Reach's jagged peaks, the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead grows ever thinner. The supernatural residents of Old Hroldan Inn prepare for another night of continued existence in their chosen sanctuary, while mortal guests settle into chambers where history itself seems to whisper from every weathered beam and time-worn stone. The mysteries that surround this legendary establishment continue to deepen with each passing season, as new manifestations emerge and existing phenomena evolve in ways that challenge every attempt at complete understanding. Yet perhaps this endless complexity serves a greater purpose, ensuring that the stories of those who came before will never be fully forgotten, preserved not in dusty tomes or crumbling monuments, but in the living memory of spirits who refuse to let the past fade into obscurity. The eternal vigil maintained by the ghosts of Old Hroldan Inn represents more than mere supernatural persistence. It embodies the fundamental Nordic belief that honor and duty extend beyond the boundaries of mortal life, that some obligations transcend death itself and bind the departed to continue their service in whatever form circumstances permit. In the depths of winter's embrace, when frost patterns form intricate hieroglyphs across the inn's ancient window panes, and the very air seems to crystallize with supernatural energy, the most profound manifestations occur within the structure's hidden passages and forgotten chambers. These concealed spaces, known only to the ghostly inhabitants and discovered accidentally by the most adventurous living visitors, contain the accumulated secrets of countless generations who sought refuge within Old Hroldan's protective walls. The network of hidden corridors that honeycomb the inn's interior walls represents architectural additions spanning multiple centuries, each expansion reflecting the paranoia and practical necessities of different historical periods. During times of political upheaval, when powerful enemies sought to eliminate rivals through assassination or kidnapping, wealthy travelers demanded discreet routes that would allow them to move throughout the building without exposing themselves to observation or attack. These secret pathways remain accessible to those who know their locations, though the knowledge of their existence comes primarily through supernatural guidance rather than conventional architectural study. The ghostly residents seem to delight in revealing these hidden roots to living guests who demonstrate appropriate reverence for the inn's history, leading them through passages that connect distant parts of the building in ways that defy the logical layout of the visible structure. Within these concealed spaces, the supernatural phenomena take on characteristics that differ markedly from the more public manifestations experienced in the common areas and guest chambers. The ghosts who inhabit these hidden realms appear to maintain their most private thoughts and secrets, sharing intimate details about their mortal lives that they would never reveal in the presence of other spirits or casual living visitors. The walls of these secret passages bear inscriptions carved by both living and dead hands, creating a palimpsest of messages that span centuries of continuous occupation. Ancient Nordic runes intermingle with more recent scripts, while supernatural additions appear in scripts that seem to shift and change, depending on the observer's linguistic capabilities, ensuring that each viewer can understand the essential meaning regardless of their educational background or cultural origin. These hidden inscriptions reveal a complex network of relationships and rivalries that persisted among the inn's supernatural residents long after their mortal deaths. Territorial disputes, romantic entanglements, and philosophical disagreements continue to influence the behavior of the ghostly inhabitants, creating undercurrents of tension and alliance that shape the supernatural ecosystem in ways that remain largely invisible to casual observers. The most remarkable aspect of these concealed chambers involves their apparent ability to exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously. Visitors may enter a passage decorated according to Fourth Era sensibilities, only to emerge into a space that clearly belongs to the First Era, complete with architectural elements and furnishings that predate the inn's known construction by several centuries. These temporal anomalies suggest that the hidden passages serve as bridges, not only between different physical locations, but also between different historical periods, allowing the supernatural residents to access memories and experiences from across the entire span of the inn's existence. The mechanism behind these chronological connections remains one of the most puzzling aspects of Old Hroldan's supernatural phenomena, challenging conventional understanding of how time and space interact within environments suffused with spiritual energy. The inn's tower, a defensive structure added during the Second Era when forsworn raids posed constant threats to travelers, houses what may be the most significant supernatural presence in the entire establishment. This elevated sanctuary serves as the domain of a ghostly figure whose identity remains shrouded in mystery despite centuries of speculation and investigation by visiting scholars and supernatural researchers. Unlike the more gregarious spirits who inhabit the lower levels, this tower phantom maintains an aloof dignity that discourages casual interaction while commanding obvious respect from all other supernatural residents. The entity appears only rarely to living visitors, typically manifesting during moments of particular historical significance, or when the inn faces threats that require supernatural intervention to resolve. When this mysterious figure does choose to reveal itself, witnesses describe a presence of overwhelming authority and wisdom that seems to embody the collective experience of Nordic civilization itself. The apparition speaks in archaic dialects that predate recorded linguistic evolution, using grammatical structures and vocabulary that suggest origins in the earliest periods of human settlement in Skyrim. The conversations reported by those fortunate enough to encounter this ancient spirit reveal perspectives that encompass not only the recorded history of the Nordic people, but also the prehistoric migrations and cultural developments that shaped their civilization before written records began. The entity demonstrates intimate knowledge of legendary figures and events that exist only in the most fragmentary mythological accounts, filling gaps in historical understanding with details that consistently prove accurate when subjected to archaeological verification. The tower chamber itself undergoes dramatic transformations during these rare manifestations, with the physical space expanding far beyond its apparent dimensions, to accommodate furnishings and decorations that reflect the pinnacle of Nordic craftsmanship from multiple historical periods. These supernatural renovations create an environment that serves simultaneously as a throne room, library, and war council chamber, providing appropriate settings for the diverse functions this mysterious spirit seems to serve. The practical influence wielded by this tower resident extends throughout the entire supernatural community of Old Hroldan Inn, with lesser ghosts seeking permission before undertaking actions that might affect the establishment's relationship with the living world. This hierarchical structure ensures that the supernatural phenomena remain generally benevolent and constructive, rather than descending into the chaotic or malevolent manifestations that characterize many haunted locations. During the spring months, when mountain snowmelt creates rushing streams that carry the promise of renewal throughout the surrounding landscape, the supernatural activity at Old Hroldan Inn takes on characteristics that reflect themes of rebirth and regeneration. The ghostly residents seem to participate in their own version of seasonal celebration, manifesting with increased frequency and demonstrating renewed interest in engaging with living visitors who arrive during this period of natural awakening. The phantom musicians who appear during these spring celebrations possess repertoires that include melodies and harmonies from across the entire span of Nordic musical development, performing compositions that range from ancient ritual chants to sophisticated court entertainments that demonstrate remarkable artistic evolution over time. These supernatural concerts often continue throughout the night, with the ghostly performers showing no signs of fatigue while creating musical experiences that far exceed the capabilities of any mortal ensemble. The emotional impact of these spectral performances proves particularly profound for living listeners, who report experiencing complex feelings that seem to arise from sources beyond their personal memories or experiences. The phantom music appears capable of evoking collective memories and cultural associations that connect individual listeners to the broader narrative of Nordic civilization, creating temporary bonds between past and present that transcend the normal limitations of mortal consciousness. The inn's wine cellar, carved deep into the mountain bedrock and maintained at constant temperature through both natural geology and supernatural intervention, houses a collection of vintages that spans centuries of Nordic viticulture development. The ghostly vintners who oversee this underground sanctuary demonstrate expertise that encompasses not only traditional winemaking techniques, but also innovations that seem to have emerged through centuries of supernatural experimentation and refinement. The phantom wines stored within this cellar possess characteristics that defy conventional understanding of fermentation and aging processes, maintaining perfect balance and complexity despite their impossible antiquity. Bottles bearing labels from vineyards that ceased operations centuries ago continue to improve with age, developing flavors and aromas that exceed anything achievable through mortal winemaking methods. Living guests granted access to these supernatural vintages report experiencing not only exceptional flavors, but also vivid sensory memories that seem to transport them to the times and places where the original grapes were cultivated and processed. These phantom recollections provide intimate glimpses into daily life during various historical periods, revealing details about social customs, agricultural practices, and cultural values that illuminate aspects of Nordic civilization rarely captured in formal historical documentation. The ghostly sommeliers who serve these ancient wines demonstrate remarkable knowledge of food pairings and ceremonial protocols that span multiple eras of Nordic dining tradition, creating presentations that honor both the historical significance of the beverages and the contemporary preferences of their living guests. Their expertise extends beyond mere technical knowledge to encompass the social and spiritual dimensions of communal drinking, transforming simple wine service into elaborate rituals that celebrate the continuity of Nordic cultural identity across centuries of change and development. The supernatural preservation methods employed within the cellar appear to extend beyond the wine collection to include other perishable items that maintain their quality indefinitely through ghostly intervention. Ancient cheeses, preserved meats, and exotic delicacies from distant provinces remain perfectly edible despite their impossible age, providing opportunities for living visitors to experience culinary traditions that have been lost to the modern world. The inn's blacksmith shop, though its forges have stood cold for decades in the mortal realm, continues to operate under supernatural management that produces weapons and tools of extraordinary quality and historical significance. The ghostly smiths who work these phantom fires demonstrate mastery of metallurgical techniques that combine traditional Nordic methods with innovations that seem to transcend normal limitations of available materials and equipment. The spectral craftsmen show particular interest in maintaining and repairing items belonging to living visitors, often working throughout the night to restore damaged weapons or tools to condition that exceeds their original specifications. These supernatural improvements typically include enhancements that reflect the specific needs and preferences of the item's owners, with the ghostly smiths demonstrating uncanny ability to understand how each piece of equipment will be used and what modifications would prove most beneficial. The phantom forges operate without conventional fuel, while producing temperatures that exceed anything achievable through normal combustion, allowing the supernatural smiths to work with exotic metals and alloys that would be impossible to process using mortal techniques. The resulting products demonstrate characteristics that suggest the incorporation of materials that exist only in the supernatural realm, creating items that bridge the gap between mundane craftsmanship and magical artifact. Living visitors who observe these nocturnal smithing sessions report learning techniques and principles that enhance their own crafting abilities long after departing Old Hroldan Inn, suggesting that the ghostly masters share their knowledge through subtle forms of supernatural teaching that operate below the threshold of conscious awareness. These transmitted skills often manifest as intuitive understanding of metallurgy and design principles that enable mortal craftsmen to achieve results that surprise even their own expectations. The inn's observatory, a small chamber constructed within the highest point of the tower, specifically for astronomical observations, serves as a focal point for supernatural phenomena that connect the earthly manifestations with cosmic forces that operate on scales beyond normal human comprehension. The ghostly astronomers who maintain this elevated sanctuary possess knowledge of celestial mechanics and astrological principles that extends far beyond what any individual mortal scholar could accumulate during a single lifetime. These phantom stargazers demonstrate ability to predict astronomical events with precision that exceeds modern scientific calculations, offering insights into planetary movements and stellar phenomena that prove consistently accurate when subjected to verification through contemporary observation. Their supernatural perspective seems to encompass not only the visible celestial bodies, but also the subtle influences and connections that link cosmic events to earthly occurrences in ways that challenge conventional understanding of causality and natural law. The spectral instruments maintained within the observatory include devices that appear to function through principles that transcend normal optical and mechanical limitations, allowing observations of celestial phenomena that remain invisible to conventional telescopes and measuring equipment. These supernatural tools provide access to information about distant stars and planets that enables the ghostly astronomers to offer guidance and predictions that prove invaluable for understanding both immediate circumstances and long-term trends. Living visitors granted access to the observatory often report experiencing profound shifts in perspective that fundamentally alter their understanding of their place within the larger cosmic order, recognizing connections between individual actions and universal patterns that had previously remained invisible. These revelations typically produce lasting changes in behavior and priorities that reflect deeper appreciation for the interconnected nature of all existence. The inn's library annex, a specialized collection housed within chambers that seem to exist partially outside normal dimensional constraints, contains manuscripts and documents that chronicle aspects of Nordic history that have been forgotten or deliberately suppressed by conventional scholars and political authorities. The ghostly librarians who maintain these supernatural archives demonstrate commitment to preserving knowledge that transcends partisan interests or contemporary concerns, focusing instead on maintaining accurate records that serve the interests of truth and understanding. These phantom scholars show particular dedication to correcting historical inaccuracies and exposing propaganda that has distorted popular understanding of important events and figures from Nordic civilizations past. Their supernatural perspective allows them to access multiple sources and witness accounts that provide comprehensive views of complex situations that were often misrepresented in official records created by partisan observers or political authorities with specific agendas to advance. The spectral historians demonstrate remarkable objectivity in their approach to controversial topics, presenting multiple perspectives while allowing living researchers to draw their own conclusions based on complete information, rather than the selective evidence that often characterizes conventional historical scholarship. This commitment to intellectual honesty creates opportunities for understanding that transcend the limitations imposed by political considerations and cultural biases that typically influence the interpretation of historical events. The supernatural preservation methods employed within the library annex ensure that fragile documents maintain their readability indefinitely while remaining accessible to qualified researchers who demonstrate appropriate reverence for the knowledge they contain. The ghostly guardians show careful judgment in determining which materials to share with living visitors, considering both the researcher's ability to understand complex information and their likelihood of using the knowledge responsibly. As the night deepens around Old Hroldan Inn and the supernatural residents continue their eternal vigil within its ancient walls, the complex tapestry of phenomena that defines this legendary establishment reveals new layers of meaning and significance. Each ghostly inhabitant contributes their own unique perspective and expertise to a collective consciousness that preserves not only individual memories, but also the broader cultural heritage of Nordic civilization in forms that transcend the limitations of conventional historical documentation. The interweaving of past and present that characterizes life at Old Hroldan Inn creates opportunities for understanding that extend far beyond simple supernatural entertainment or historical curiosity. The ghostly residents serve as bridges between different eras and perspectives, offering insights that illuminate the continuity of human experience while honoring the unique characteristics that distinguish different historical periods and cultural contexts. The supernatural phenomena that manifest throughout the inn's many chambers and hidden spaces represent more than mere echoes of past events or residual spiritual energy clinging to familiar surroundings. Instead, they embody active engagement with the ongoing story of Nordic civilization, demonstrating that death does not necessarily end one's ability to contribute to the welfare and understanding of future generations. The complex relationships and hierarchies that exist among the ghostly inhabitants reflect the sophisticated social structures that characterized Nordic society during its various phases of development, while also revealing how these relationships continue to evolve and adapt in response to changing circumstances and new challenges that emerge over time. The seasonal variations in supernatural activity suggest that the spirits maintain their own calendar of observances and celebrations that honor both personal anniversaries and culturally significant events, creating rhythms of activity that connect the supernatural community to the natural cycles that continue to influence life in the mortal realm. The educational opportunities provided by interaction with these knowledgeable spirits offer unique perspectives on historical events and cultural developments that cannot be obtained through conventional scholarly research, while the practical assistance they provide to living visitors demonstrates ongoing commitment to serving the needs of travelers who seek shelter and guidance within their eternal sanctuary. The therapeutic benefits reported by guests who spend extended periods at Old Hroldan Inn suggest that the supernatural residents possess healing capabilities that operate through mechanisms far more sophisticated than conventional medicine or magical intervention. The ghostly physicians who occasionally manifest within the inn's chambers demonstrate diagnostic abilities that seem to perceive ailments at levels that transcend purely physical symptoms, identifying spiritual and emotional wounds that contribute to illness in ways that mortal healers rarely recognize or address. These phantom medical practitioners employed treatment methods that combine ancient Nordic healing traditions with techniques that appear to have evolved through centuries of supernatural experimentation and refinement. Their approach emphasizes restoring balance between the physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of their patients' well-being, recognizing that true health requires harmony among all dimensions of human existence rather than merely addressing isolated symptoms or conditions. The healing rituals conducted by these ghostly physicians often involve the participation of multiple spirits who contribute their specialized knowledge and abilities to create comprehensive treatment programs tailored to each patient's unique circumstances and needs. These collaborative efforts demonstrate the sophisticated understanding of medical theory and practice that the supernatural residents have developed through their extended observation of human suffering and recovery across multiple generations. Living patients who undergo these phantom medical treatments report experiencing not only relief from their immediate symptoms, but also profound insights into the underlying causes of their conditions, gaining understanding that enables them to make lifestyle changes and behavioral modifications that prevent future recurrence of similar health problems. This educational component distinguishes the supernatural healing methods from conventional approaches that often focus primarily on symptom management rather than addressing root causes. The medicinal preparations created by the ghostly apothecaries combine herbs and substances from multiple historical periods, including ingredients that have been extinct in the mortal realm for centuries, but continue to exist in spectral form within the inn's supernatural ecosystem. These phantom pharmaceuticals demonstrate properties that exceed their mortal counterparts in both potency and precision, providing targeted relief with minimal side effects or complications. The inn's music room, a chamber dedicated to artistic expression and cultural preservation, serves as a gathering place for phantom performers whose combined talents span the entire breadth of Nordic musical tradition. The ghostly musicians who convene within this acoustic sanctuary demonstrate mastery of instruments and vocal techniques that represent the pinnacle of achievement from their respective historical periods, creating ensemble performances that showcase the evolution and sophistication of Nordic musical culture. These supernatural concerts feature compositions that include not only well-known traditional pieces, but also original works, created through collaborative efforts among the ghostly composers who continue to develop new artistic expressions despite their ethereal existence. The creative process observed during these phantom collaborations reveals insights into musical theory and compositional techniques that illuminate the artistic sensibilities and cultural values of different historical eras. The emotional resonance achieved through these spectral performances appears to operate on frequencies that affect listeners at levels beyond normal auditory perception, creating psychological and spiritual responses that suggest the music serves therapeutic as well as artistic purposes. Living audience members frequently report experiencing cathartic releases of suppressed emotions or traumatic memories, finding resolution and peace through their participation in these supernatural musical experiences. The phantom instruments maintained within the music room include examples of craftsmanship that represent the highest achievements of Nordic musical instrument makers across multiple centuries, with many pieces demonstrating construction techniques and tonal qualities that exceed anything available in the contemporary world. These spectral instruments seem to respond to the intentions and emotions of their ghostly players in ways that transcend normal mechanical limitations, producing sounds and effects that blur the boundaries between music and magic. The inn's war room, a strategic planning chamber that served military commanders during various conflicts throughout Nordic history, continues to host phantom councils where ghostly generals and tacticians analyze contemporary political developments and military situations, with the benefit of centuries of accumulated experience and wisdom. These supernatural war councils demonstrate sophisticated understanding of strategic principles and tactical considerations that remain relevant for understanding both historical events and current geopolitical challenges. The spectral military leaders who participate in these ongoing strategic discussions represent diverse backgrounds and specialties that encompass every aspect of Nordic military tradition, from cavalry tactics and siege warfare to naval operations and intelligence gathering. Their collective expertise provides comprehensive perspectives on complex military problems that benefit from multiple viewpoints and extensive historical precedent. The phantom battle plans developed during these supernatural councils often reveal innovative approaches to strategic challenges that combine traditional Nordic military methods with insights gained through centuries of observing the evolution of warfare and political conflict. These ghostly strategists demonstrate remarkable ability to adapt ancient principles to contemporary circumstances, creating solutions that honor established tactical wisdom while addressing new challenges and opportunities. Living military professionals who gain access to these spectral war councils report acquiring strategic insights and tactical knowledge that significantly enhance their professional capabilities, suggesting that the ghostly commanders actively share their accumulated wisdom with mortal successors who demonstrate appropriate dedication to protecting Nordic interests and values. The inn's diplomatic chamber, a formal meeting space designed to facilitate negotiations and treaty discussions, hosts phantom conferences where ghostly ambassadors and political leaders continue to address unresolved conflicts and diplomatic challenges that span multiple generations of Nordic political development. These supernatural diplomatic sessions demonstrate sophisticated understanding of negotiation techniques and international relations that reflect centuries of accumulated experience in managing complex political relationships. The spectral diplomats who participate in these ongoing negotiations represent various factions and interests that shaped Nordic political development throughout different historical periods, providing perspectives that encompass both successful diplomatic achievements and cautionary examples of failed negotiations and their consequences. Their collective wisdom offers insights into the art of diplomacy that remain valuable for understanding contemporary political challenges and opportunities. The phantom treaties and agreements developed during these supernatural diplomatic sessions often propose solutions to persistent political problems that have defied resolution through conventional means, demonstrating creative approaches that combine historical precedent with innovative thinking that transcends the limitations typically imposed by partisan interests and cultural prejudices. The inn's treasury vault, a heavily fortified chamber that once housed the accumulated wealth of countless travelers and merchants, continues to serve as a repository for supernatural riches that include not only conventional valuables, but also intangible assets, such as knowledge, wisdom, and spiritual insights that represent forms of wealth that transcend material considerations. The ghostly treasurers who maintain this supernatural hoard demonstrate understanding of value and exchange that encompasses both economic principles and metaphysical concepts of worth and significance. The spectral currencies maintained within the treasury include forms of exchange that operated during various historical periods, providing insights into economic systems and commercial practices that shaped Nordic society's development across multiple eras of political and cultural evolution. These phantom monetary systems demonstrate the sophisticated understanding of trade and commerce that characterized Nordic civilization during its various phases of expansion and consolidation. The supernatural investment strategies employed by the ghostly treasurers reflect long-term perspectives that encompass multiple generations of economic development, demonstrating approaches to wealth management and resource allocation that prioritize sustainable prosperity over short-term gains. Their accumulated wisdom offers insights into economic principles that remain relevant for understanding contemporary financial challenges and opportunities. The inn's armory, though its physical weapons have long since been removed or deteriorated, continues to house a spectacular collection of phantom armaments that represent the pinnacle of Nordic military craftsmanship from multiple historical periods. The ghostly weaponsmith who oversees this supernatural arsenal demonstrates expertise in both the technical aspects of weapon design and the tactical considerations that influence the development of specific types of armaments for different combat situations and strategic requirements. These spectral weapons demonstrate capabilities that exceed their mortal counterparts in both effectiveness and durability, incorporating design elements that seem to transcend normal limitations of available materials and manufacturing techniques. The phantom armaments appear to adapt their characteristics to match the needs and abilities of their wielders, providing optimal performance regardless of the user's size, strength, or experience level. The ghostly weapons master shows particular interest in training living visitors in the proper use of traditional Nordic weapons, offering instruction that combines technical skill development with philosophical understanding of the warrior's path and the responsibilities that accompany the ability to take life in defense of others. These supernatural training sessions provide insights into martial arts and combat philosophy that illuminate the cultural values and ethical principles that shaped Nordic military traditions. The inn's menagerie, a collection of supernatural creatures that includes both domesticated animals and exotic beasts from across Tamriel, demonstrates the diverse relationships that Nordic culture maintained with the natural world throughout different periods of its historical development. The ghostly animal handlers who care for these phantom creatures possess knowledge of animal behavior and husbandry techniques that encompasses both practical skills and spiritual understanding of the connections between human and animal consciousness. The spectral animals within the menagerie include species that have been extinct in the mortal realm for centuries, preserved in supernatural form through the dedication of their ghostly caretakers, who refuse to allow these magnificent creatures to fade completely from existence. These phantom beasts demonstrate behaviors and capabilities that suggest they retain not only their physical characteristics, but also their intelligence and emotional capacity, creating opportunities for interactions that transcend normal limitations between human and animal consciousness. The relationships observed between the ghostly handlers and their supernatural charges reveal approaches to animal training and care that emphasize mutual respect and understanding, rather than dominance and control, demonstrating philosophies of animal husbandry that recognize the inherent value and dignity of all living creatures, regardless of their species or domestic status. The inn's workshop complex houses a variety of specialized crafting facilities where ghostly artisans continue to practice trades and professions that represent the full spectrum of Nordic economic activity throughout different historical periods. The phantom craftsmen who operate these supernatural workshops demonstrate mastery of techniques that combine traditional methods with innovations developed through centuries of experimentation and refinement in the spectral realm. These ghostly artisans show particular dedication to maintaining the highest standards of quality and craftsmanship, creating products that serve as examples of what can be achieved when skill and dedication are not constrained by normal limitations of time, materials, or economic pressures. Their supernatural creations often incorporate elements that transcend purely functional considerations, embedding artistic and spiritual significance that transforms everyday objects into expressions of cultural values and aesthetic principles. The collaborative relationships observed among the phantom craftsmen reveal guild-like structures that preserve traditional approaches to apprenticeship and skill development, while adapting these systems to accommodate the unique circumstances of supernatural existence. These ghostly professional associations demonstrate commitment to preserving craft knowledge and passing skills to future generations that transcends the normal limitations of mortal lifespans. The training opportunities provided by these supernatural workshops offer living visitors chances to learn traditional Nordic crafts and trades from masters whose expertise represents centuries of accumulated knowledge and experience, providing educational experiences that cannot be replicated through conventional apprenticeship programs or academic study. The inn's cartography chamber houses an extensive collection of maps and navigational materials that chronicle the exploration and settlement of Nordic territories throughout different phases of cultural expansion and political development. The ghostly explorers and navigators who maintain this supernatural geographic archive possess knowledge of routes and destinations that extends far beyond what any individual mortal traveler could accumulate during a single lifetime of exploration and adventure. These phantom maps include detailed depictions of regions and landmarks that have been lost or transformed beyond recognition in the contemporary world, preserving geographic knowledge that provides insights into historical migration patterns, trade routes, and territorial boundaries that shaped Nordic political and cultural development across multiple eras of expansion and consolidation. The spectral cartographers demonstrate remarkable ability to update their maps continuously, incorporating new information about geographic changes and political developments that affect travel and exploration in the modern world. Their supernatural perspective allows them to observe long-term environmental changes and political shifts that enable them to provide current navigational guidance that combines historical knowledge with contemporary awareness. Living travelers who consult these phantom maps often receive guidance that proves invaluable for planning expeditions and journeys that benefit from understanding both current conditions and historical precedents that illuminate potential challenges and opportunities that might not be apparent through conventional route planning and geographic research. The inn's alchemical laboratory, equipped with apparatus that spans multiple eras of chemical and magical research, continues to operate under the supervision of ghostly alchemists whose combined knowledge encompasses both traditional Nordic potion-making techniques and experimental approaches that have been developed through centuries of supernatural investigation and discovery. These phantom researchers demonstrate understanding of chemical and magical principles that transcends normal limitations of available materials and equipment, creating preparations and compounds that achieve effects impossible through conventional alchemical methods. Their supernatural experiments often focus on bridging the gap between physical and spiritual phenomena, developing substances that affect both bodily health and metaphysical well-being. The collaborative research conducted by these ghostly alchemists reveals approaches to experimental methodology that emphasize long-term observation and careful analysis over quick results and immediate applications, demonstrating scientific principles that prioritize thorough understanding over practical exploitation of discovered phenomena. The supernatural laboratory maintains extensive records of experimental results and theoretical developments that provide insights into the evolution of alchemical knowledge and the relationship between chemical processes and magical effects, offering perspectives on natural philosophy that illuminate fundamental questions about the nature of matter and energy that remain relevant for contemporary magical and scientific research. As the eternal night continues its embrace of Old Hroldan Inn, the countless supernatural residents maintain their vigil within chambers that exist simultaneously in multiple temporal states, preserving not only their individual memories and expertise, but also the collective wisdom of Nordic civilization in forms that transcend the normal limitations of historical documentation and cultural transmission. The complex ecosystem of ghostly inhabitants demonstrates that death need not represent the end of one's ability to contribute to the welfare and understanding of future generations, suggesting that consciousness and identity persist in forms that allow continued growth, learning, and service that benefits both the supernatural community and the living visitors who seek knowledge, healing, and guidance within this remarkable sanctuary. The seasonal rhythms and cyclical patterns that govern supernatural activity throughout the inn reflect deep connections to cosmic forces and natural processes that operate on scales beyond individual comprehension, linking the ghostly residents to universal principles that ensure their continued existence serves purposes that transcend personal desires for immortality or supernatural power. The educational opportunities, healing experiences, and cultural preservation efforts maintained by the phantom inhabitants create a living museum that demonstrates the continuity of Nordic values and traditions, while adapting these principles to address contemporary challenges and opportunities that require wisdom gained through centuries of observation and experience. The collaborative relationships among spirits from different historical periods and social backgrounds reveal possibilities for unity and cooperation that transcend the divisions and conflicts that often characterize mortal society, suggesting that supernatural existence provides opportunities for personal growth and social development that continue beyond the normal boundaries of individual lifespans. The therapeutic benefits experienced by living visitors who participate in the inn's supernatural community demonstrate that interaction with the ghostly residents can provide healing and insight that addresses not only immediate needs, but also deep-seated spiritual and emotional wounds that conventional treatment methods often fail to reach effectively. The preservation of extinct knowledge, lost technologies, and forgotten cultural practices within the inn's supernatural environment ensures that valuable aspects of Nordic heritage continue to exist and remain accessible to future generations who might benefit from understanding their historical roots and cultural foundations. The ongoing creative and intellectual activities pursued by the ghostly inhabitants suggest that supernatural existence provides opportunities for continued growth and development that transcend the limitations typically associated with death and the afterlife, demonstrating that consciousness retains its capacity for learning, creativity, and meaningful contribution to the broader community of all sentient beings.